So I'm just going to begin our presentation with a little context setting about why we need transformational change now, particularly on environmental advocacy. Um, and this we know we need to break from the status quo in the next 10 years and really um, transform our infrastructure and where we get our energy. We need to cut our carbon emissions in half by 2030 and eliminate them by 2050. And Cecilia, we can go to the next slide. And so in all things, we always center people. And I think that sometimes with environmental issues, we don't always see the human face of climate change. But in the past year, we have seen the effects of climate change on migration, especially in the dry corridor in Central America, where there has been a prolonged drought, which is increased migration. We've seen an increase in the intensity of hurricanes, especially in Central America and the Gulf Coast. Especially in 2020, we saw, again, mass migration after the two hurricanes that particularly hit Honduras very intensely. We've also seen wildfires that are predicted to intensify in the United States and in Australia. And then also due to temperature increase in the oceans, we have seen on the eastern Horn of Africa, there was a locust outbreak due to increased cyclones due to the water temperatures. And all of this is happening in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, in which we have seen the racial inequity and environmental inequities in how communities have been affected. We've seen the BIPOC communities particularly disproportionately affected. And then even as we think about equity in terms of how the vaccines are distributed in our own country and globally, we know that all of these issues are connected. And so we in the United States have a particular responsibility to respond, and as Catholics to respond to the call of our sisters and brothers across the globe.
Thank you, Brenna. And so we are living at a critical time, a critical moment in history, and we're also, I think, living. This is a hopeful time as we have new leadership in the United States, new president and administration that takes climate change and environmental justice seriously. I think there's a real opportunity for us to get some good things done, and some positive actions have already been taken by the administration in these early days. You can see some of the key actions that have already been taken here. Among them, of course, is the United States joining the Paris Climate Agreement and being willing to signal that we want to work with our brothers and sisters around the world, with leaders around the world, to address this urgent crisis. To act as one human family. And so during this time, what are our environmental priorities for our Office of Justice and Ecology? And these are joint priorities also with the Ignatian Solidarity Network. We want to ensure that we accelerate the transition to clean energy to mitigate climate change. Again, we all know we're in a critical window. This next 10 years are especially important. And we know that we need to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius in order to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. We want to invest in sustainable infrastructure that will create jobs and help move us towards a sustainable future. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. And we want to place at the center communities that are most impacted by environmental injustice. This can be rural and urban low-income communities, communities of color, indigenous communities, really making sure that we're listening to their voices and that they have a say in terms of how these environmental and climate change policies are designed, and that they benefit from these policies. So today we're going to focus on sustainable infrastructure. We all saw what happened in Texas, the crippling blackouts and the power crisis there that left millions of people without water and electricity for days. My sister and her family in Houston were among those families. And this is a clear sign of why we need to upgrade our nation's aging infrastructure. So when, what, and how might this happen? It's now that COVID relief bill will get done now, that the administration Biden President Biden are going to turn their attention to an infrastructure package. So we believe that this will be the focus coming up next. And how, how can this package get moved through Congress? So a starting point for this infrastructure plan, President Biden during the campaign developed and shared his Build Back Better plan, focusing on building a modern, sustainable infrastructure and an equitable, clean energy future. And this will be, we don't know what will be the components of a new infrastructure package, but this will likely be key among the considerations of President Biden's Build Back Better plan. And here are some of the key components of that plan. And the hope is that an infrastructure package will go beyond building roads and bridges and include more significant investments, investments in public transportation to upgrade our water systems, to expand access to broadband. We've seen during the pandemic how critical it is to have internet access both for work and for children who are going to school, to upgrade our buildings and weatherize homes, investing in affordable housing and energy efficient housing, to invest in the power sector, in energy efficiency, clean energy, and electrical systems that will help us achieve a carbon pollution-free power sector by 2035. That's one of the key goals. And of course, environmental justice, last on this list, but not least. Inherent in Biden's plan to rebuild a resilient and sustainable infrastructure and a clean energy economy is prioritizing environmental justice communities, communities that have historically been most impacted by environmental harm. Again, Indigenous communities, communities of color, rural communities, and urban low-income communities. So really wanting them to have a place at the table in these discussions. And so there's a big question about the scope of this plan, right? Will it be narrower or will it be broader? Which is the hope. And that's going to be, there'll be a lot of discussions about that. I think in theory, there is possibility for there to be bipartisan action on an infrastructure package. And that is the hope, and that is President Biden's preference. Of course, we know that that's going to require 60 votes in the Senate, which will mean we'll need to bring on 10 Republicans, and that is going to be a challenge. And that's so we really appreciate you being here and and taking an interest in helping to work with us. Your outreach is going to be critical, and I think especially if you are in states or districts with Republicans, your voice on this and speaking on this will be very important. Another point of contention on this, of course, is the cost. You know, it's a dollar figure hasn't been set on the plan yet, but in President Biden's Build Back Better plan, there's was a $2 trillion cost. So the cost of this and how to pay for it, those are big questions and some points of contention. For example, will taxes be used in order to pay for this plan? But this is a real opportunity for our nation to improve our resiliency, to move toward a clean energy future, to protect our health, to create jobs, jobs that are well-paying jobs, union jobs, and yeah, to create jobs here in the United States.